Beautiful, beautiful. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you are here joining us today. If y'all would like to, we would love for you to introduce yourselves in the chat here in a minute while everybody kind of settles in. Tell us who you are, where you're joining from, and why are you here today. We're most interested in hearing what brings this community together. We really need that background music for the next one.
I was just gonna call out. I'm wearing my boots today. Actually, me and the team, we've been wearing our boots all week to celebrate Beyonce album. So it's been a strong week here at Nuestra Tierra.
Strong week. I love that. I'm just wearing my socks right now. Maybe I should go wear some boots.
Totally.
But yeah, we'll kick it off with some Bay next time. Please be patient. First time we do this, and just tech difficulty with the music. We really want to have a soundtrack here. But hi, everyone. Hi, Jamie with Latino Outdoor Seattle, outings leader, and here to learn about how to make a bigger impact. We love that. Jeremy from Santa Clara County Parks. Beautiful. Thanks for joining us. Mireya Casares from East Bay. Pat Fribley from Birdability, because we are all about accessible birding. Oh my gosh, I really need to connect with you all because birding is hard. Gabe Martinez, Colorado's 8th Congressional District, welcome. Nicole from Boulder, Colorado. Heidi from Miami, Florida. Oh, I love seeing where everyone's joining in from. Moab, Utah. Olympia, Washington. Rebecca from University of New Mexico. Boop, boop. Locals here. Viviane from Environment for the Americas in Colorado. Allison from Asheville, North Carolina. Everyone here trying to make better, inclusive, accessible spaces. Well, this is what we are all about. Really loving to see the diversity of folks, geographies that are joining here today. I just want to welcome everyone and saying that we are all here to learn together. We have some experiences here that we're excited to share, but that doesn't mean that we have all the answers for all the things. So thank you so much for being generous and joining us today. Without further ado, welcome to the first of a new series, Into the Future. This is an online event that we at the Outdoor Future Initiative are hosting, dedicating to exploring the many facets of outdoor equity, inclusion, and opportunity from diverse perspectives. We really just want to bring that diversity of perspectives to this table so that we can all continuously learn from each other, and also to really highlight the need for a nationwide access to these programs. So who's the Outdoor Future Initiative? Why are we doing this? I'm a member of the Outdoor Future Initiative, and we've been working over the past couple of years to build public and political momentum to create a national outdoor opportunity fund, because we believe that now is the time for our nation's federal government to prioritize investments in our nation's youth. We're building upon the success of the New Mexico State Outdoor Equity Fund, the Outdoor Equity Grants programs in Colorado, California, and in addition to other efforts which continue to emerge across the nation, such as North Carolina, Nevada, and many others that are on the path to creating their own state-level opportunities. And what would a federal fund provide for our youth? We're really here talking about large-scale investments in programs to ensure that all our youth across the nation, regardless of their income, regardless of their zip code, have the opportunity to enjoy the outdoors and its health, educational, and career-building benefits. If you are like me, you've had the privilege of experiencing this firsthand, and I am sure you would agree that it's an opportunity that everybody deserves. So that's what we are here to do. all that said, I will now introduce myself. I'm Gabacha Moreno, pronounced she, her. I'm tuning in today from the ancestral lands of the Pueblo and Jicarilla Apache peoples in northern New Mexico. I am a member of the Outdoor F.U.T.U.R.E initiative, as well as I serve as the executive director of an organization called the Outdoor F.U.T.U.R.E, creating accessible education to help people take action for planet inclusion and adventure. And with that, I'm going to popcorn to today's panelists. If y'all can say your name, where you're tuning in from, your affiliations, and also how did you arrive at working in outdoor equity and opportunity? I will pass to Vivianette.
Hola, everyone. My name is Vivianette Ortiz Caraballo, she, her, ella pronouns. I am tuning in from the Catawba lands, ancestral lands, and I am connected with the Outdoor Equity because we're recipients. Latinos Aventureros is recipients of the Outdoor Equity Fund in North Carolina by Made by Mountains.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I will popcorn it over to Axie.
Lovely, thanks so much. So I am Axie Nava. I use she, her pronouns. I am also calling in from the beautiful lands of the Jicarilla Apache and Pueblo people in what is now northern New Mexico, my home. I have a seat at this table at the Wilderness Society, where I'm on the national campaigns team. But how I come to the Outdoor Equity Fund work is that I had the great honor of serving as the Outdoor Recreation Director for New Mexico. Thanks so much for having me. And I'll kick it to Ángel.
Thank you, Ms. Axie, Ms. Vivianette, good to see you. Ms. Cavacha, appreciate your leadership. My name is Ángel Peña. I am first the father of 3 crazy kiddos that I am raising here in the stolen lands and broken treaties of the Jornada Mogollón, or southern New Mexico, Las Cruces. I am also privileged executive director of the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project, where the team and I wake up every day to ensure that deliberately historically excluded communities, not only do we have access to these amazing places, but we have access to the public land management process. And we do this through education, advocacy, and good old people power. And then I am a damn proud member of the Outdoor F.U.T.U.R.E initiative, where we are really trying to redefine the 21st century of conservation through collective action and through respect for all the stories that and all the lived and learned experiences that we bring to the table. And that's me. Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much for sharing. I'm not going to stop sharing my screen because let's just dive into this much needed conversation. We're so honored to have each and every one of you all sharing about the great experiences that you'll have from all this diversity of perspectives. So I'm going to open it with a question for anybody who feels called to answer this. The Outdoor F.U.T.U.R.E is currently trying to support legislation to create this National Outdoor Opportunity Fund. This would give every state the opportunity to access much needed funds that will get their youth and families outdoors, depending on their communities, right? So every community has different access needs. So whether you've been a recipient of an equity grant, or whether you've directed a grant, or whether you supported the creation of a grant, how would this National Outdoor Opportunity Fund continue to support the local efforts where they exist and where they don't yet exist?
I'll jump in to get the juices flowing here. Yes, New Mexico, we're a proud home of the first of its kind Outdoor Equity Fund. And I'll tell you, we did some hard learning, definitely some lessons learned. And one of those is that a vision without resources is little more than a hallucination. And so that's when a broad and diverse group of leaders, both ethnically and geographically, from around the country, came together to see, like, all right, how do we take what we've learned here and not only incentivize other states, other political champions to create their own outdoor equity funds, but how do we ensure that rubber can meet the road immediately? How can we make sure that we're able to create access and opportunities for the next generation of kiddos, my kiddos, to not only enjoy our amazing landscapes, but really learn and create memories with one another, memories that I know I've took on as a little kid and has really driven me in my work today. And so very proud to be part of the Outdoor Future Initiative to support other states and really help cultivate the next generation of people who love and care about our amazing backyards. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Angel. And with that, recognizing, acknowledging that New Mexico State was the first state to push across the finish line a grants program such as this. Now I want to ask you, Axie, particularly because you were there in kind of this founding moment of creating the New Mexico Outdoor Recreation Division and seeing this through for the first time without really anywhere else to look for guidance. So what was the biggest lesson that you learned through that process?
Oh, I love that question. And I would just also on how you laid out the answer to this past question so beautifully, and just the thing that calls to mind when we're talking about a national fund is we can't all be as lucky as us New Mexicans to have this incredible group of grassroots activists fighting for an outdoor equity fund, right? And so everyone in this country, even if you have the misfortune of not living in New Mexico, you deserve access to an outdoor equity fund. And so that's what has always inspired me about this national concept. But the biggest lesson I learned, gosh, I don't even know where to start, but I'll ground it in some present day moments. I actually just ran into an Outdoor Equity Fund recipient in Arizona. They had just been traveling to Tucson. They were there for some other environmental justice and conservation work. And then I ran into a Outdoor Equity Fund recipient in Las Cruces a few weeks ago, just by happenstance. And they brought up how transformational this grant was. And that, maybe I'll sum that up as a lesson to me. I approach it with deep humility to say, I have met people now who years into the future have been recipients of this grant and say how transformational it is for their community's long-term health, for thriving communities in rural New Mexico, in cities throughout New Mexico. And that's, I think, one lesson I want to uplift, is just to say, this might start with a vision more than a hallucination. You have to put money into it too. You have to think about how you actually get these dollars out on the ground, knowing that it starts there and then actually ends with people on the ground doing the work and transforming their communities, one program, one project, one idea at a time.
So powerful and so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so grateful we have Vivianette here, who is actually a recipient of one of such grants in their North Carolina version. And would love to hear from you, Vivianette. What were you able to achieve directly as a result from becoming a grantee?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. So with the support of the Outdoor Equity Fund, we achieved a major milestone. We were able to create the Líderes Latinos Summit. And this was a game changer for us because 95% of our volunteer leaders had no previous experience in outdoor leadership, safety, training, or anything like that. And in order to receive those trainings, you need funds. So the Outdoor Equity Fund was a game changer. Thanks to that, we were able to train 17 Latino leaders in wilderness first aid. The summit spanned 3 days and 2 nights, and it included intensive learning, also lots of culturally rich experiences. Our programmings were things like organizational strategy, medicinal herbs, Smokies biodiversity, which was really interesting, hiking at night and seeing all of the biodiversity under black lights. Indigenous place-based history, for many of us who are new to the Carolinas and don't know the history of the lands. That's something that was really important. And then stewardship training. So it was a profound gathering that celebrated our heritage and bolstered our commitment to outdoor leadership. And without that Outdoor Equity Fund, we wouldn't have been able to have the summit, and possibly would have been years down the road before we would have been able to get everybody trained in wilderness first aid.
Well, talk about an impact, because that's when we say we want to create these opportunities, is precisely because of that, because the opportunities that exist have barriers to them, right? Like, for me to go get first aid certified or wilderness first responder certified, I need to have money. I need to have the ability probably to travel. I need to have the ability to take time off work, right? All these self-education takes that kind of investment. And sometimes we don't have the capability. And that's exactly what these grants programs are doing. They're bridging, they're creating the bridges so that these barriers are not barriers. And so kind of shifting our conversation towards the barrier side of things, this is kind of for whomever wants to take it, but what are the main problems that we're trying to solve through these programs? And it can be like very specific to each of y'all's communities, of course.
I can jump in there from the Outdoor Rec Division perspective. And, you know, I see a lot of chatter in the chat about this, of like, how do we use this grant? Is it for programming or what? And I think to uplift what other people have mentioned in the chat, the beauty of this program is that it's so bespoke. It can meet people where they're at in their own state, in their own community. You can have a state director, a state office show up and just listen to people and enter into authentic conversation about what those barriers may or may not be. And so this is how I get around to answering the question. I think in New Mexico, we heard a lot of concerns about just how onerous some of these federal or other state grants can be. So one barrier we wanted to make sure we addressed from the get-go is to make sure that this was a professionally run grant program, but that it was also accessible to maybe a nonprofit or organization with 1 or 2 employees, and actually focusing in a really intentional way on how do we get the money out to the community members who have been doing this for generations, for decades. So really listening and then creating that bespoke grant program. You know, and people talked about just like federal funding for equipment, for transportation, being able to do that and be able to get micro grants to put towards a few bikes, towards renting a van. Maybe it's only a couple of $1,000s that have a huge impact when it comes to building capacity and helping the groups actually get these kiddos out to the outdoors. So those are some of it's both the process that we hope to put forth in New Mexico and then some of the barriers that we heard about time and time again.
Yeah, I will add, I have really appreciated, as I've had the honor and privilege of helping 2 different cycles of grants as a reviewer in New Mexico. And my original interaction with the New Mexico Outdoor Rec office was they reach out as like, hey, would you be able to look at our application and let us know if there's any accessibility barriers that you see so that we can make this more accessible and inclusive. And just knowing that there was that kind of outreach to the community for input is so powerful. And then just knowing that there are, you know, that it's not like a grant that's going to take you like weeks and months to put together, that is actually easier than the majority of state level grants that you would need all these things to qualify and be able to apply for. So that has been really wonderful to experience from my perspective. Vivianette, I'm curious to hear from you in terms of these problems being solved. Like, what are still some of the gaps that you are perceiving could be bridged through this kind of program that's already been run in your state?
One thing that comes to mind when you guys were when you asked about barriers is many times there's opportunities for grants for groups like ours, like Latinos Aventureros, but it comes with the requirement of having to us pay out of pocket first, like for training or for gear, or if we need funds to create an event. So we would have to pay out of pocket first and then be reimbursed. And many times groups like ours don't have the funds to be able to do that. One thing that we really liked about the equity fund was that we didn't have to put forth the money first in order to reimburse. Like, we were able to give them a plan and had no barriers. Like, we could speak our language and do Spanglish if we wanted to, and we didn't have to have like tons of education on grant making. They were just very flexible with how we presented ourselves and how we came to the table. And so I think it's super important to break down as many barriers as possible and keep that in mind when asking for small groups to go ahead and apply for grants, but then have to be reimbursed, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've also just recently also learned about those reimbursing grants, and I was like, what? I mean, it sounds great if you already have a budget and, you know, kind of like offsets that, but totally, what happens when your organization is not there yet? You really need kind of the capacity building, right? You need the program building, and a lot of that chicken and the egg, like the grants want you to already be running the program to prove that it's possible, but you're like, how am I going to run this program if I'm not able to train my people in first aid and make sure that I'm going to secure everyone's safety? And so it gets into that cycle of the barrier is not being debunked with those formats. So absolutely. Now, another aspect of these equity grants is that they really support economic growth and development. And we've seen some of those studies come up in the last couple of years after they have been in place. So any of y'all that has kind of some knowledge around the economic growth impacts and would like to share some of that.
Yeah, I'll just speak generally for sure. But first, Miss Vivianette, black light hikes, dude, how did I not think about that? I'm going to do that. Sounds amazing. So thank you for that idea. And then yes, I just know that there's a poll, and I should know the most recent numbers, but the Colorado Conservation in the West, I believe, and those are amazing numbers. I think the last time I checked, outdoor recreation actually is moving more resources throughout the nation than is the automobile industry. And especially when you take a deeper dive into that, it's actually supporting rural communities. Some of the most highest paid jobs in some of these rural communities are attached to outdoor recreation. And so not only is the Outdoor Equity Fund creating opportunities for our kiddos to engage in some experiential learning, being able to have an opportunity to be regrounded in the cultures and the traditions that make all of our community so special, but it also helps them see the world of opportunity, see the world of possibility when it comes to the workforce, and especially in these rural communities. Yes, yeah, I'll stop rambling there. But the numbers, when I saw them, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? But they're not kidding. It was pretty amazing to see that.
Yeah, I really look forward to people being able to provide more pay equity, right, to their facilitators, to the people developing curriculum for experiential learning outdoors. And I mean, the connections are inevitable. You are supporting youth, which then returns in so much for the communities over time. Now, can we talk a little bit about the demand for funding? So we're obviously here talking about a national fund to continue to support those state funds. My gut check and personal knowledge is that we get asked for this much money and we have this much money to give out, right? So where are we right now in terms of the demand for funds and the funds available across the states or in the states that you have knowledge about?
Miss Axie, I'm trying to make eye contact with you over there as one of our leaders. Curious what your, yeah.
This is the perennial question. And, you know, there's a twofold challenge here. One, in New Mexico, not surprising, right? The demand for funding has consistently year over year outstripped the funding we have had. New Mexico's made some big strides, just even this last past legislative sessions on passing the Land of Enchantment Legacy Fund, which does get us closer to more robust, still inadequate, but more robust funding for the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund that's permanent. And that's the key second piece, is that permanency. And I think that's where the National Equity Fund and this vision is so important, because, you know, even from not only is the funding inadequate, from an administrative point of view, you have an Outdoor Equity Fund grant team always focused on how do we get money for next year? How do we make sure that this continues to be supported for residents of the state? And to be able to take some of that pressure off, the people who are actually getting the money out the door, would be huge in terms of actually expanding outreach, making even better applications, making it more equitable to get these funds. So I think that's the twofold benefit of talking about the national fund. And yeah, fundamentally, I think the demand, we saw so many awesome applications that we could not fund year after year because that funding just wasn't there. And so we just need to keep pushing that as a team, as a national team.
Thank you, Ms. Axie. Curious if I think I saw somebody from Califas in the house, maybe one or two folks. Please correct me in the chat there. But I think Califas was able to secure 43 or 53 or 57 million dollars for their outdoor equity grant program. And that still wasn't enough. And so, yes, Califas equals California. Thank you for that. LA in the house. Excellent. And so these folks from California know better than I that even the $57 million wasn't enough to really continue to be able to create these opportunities for our kiddos to get outside and make memories.
So I'm just gonna build on this and this more for like our collective education. How do these funds come together? Who donates? Where is this money coming from? And I know Axie already talked about kind of state legislation supporting. Can we just get kind of like the one-on-one or like how the fund comes together?
Yeah, I can start with New Mexico, this 101. Trying to keep pretty top line, but essentially the bulk of the funding came from the state legislature, but it was catalyzed by, Ángel talked about this grassroots coalition at the beginning. It was catalyzed by their work bringing in some private dollars to show, hey, there's real interest here. The state needs to step up and support these programs. And so, you know, forgive me for leaving people off the list, but that group included REI, you know, the Ted Turner Foundation, the North Face came in and supported. And I think that helped catch the attention of lawmakers in New Mexico to say, hey, we need to support this. And so that was in the very, very early days, 101, bringing in some of those private donations and then using that to encourage legislation. And then also, you know, one-time funding, junior bill funding, trying to figure out creative avenues to continue to bring money into the Outdoor Equity Fund, even if in New Mexico's case, it wasn't permanent to begin with. It started with grassroots activists with a few kind of key champions in the legislature. And then it built off of that to actually get the Outdoor Equity Fund the permanent funding that it really deserves.
Thank you so much for providing that context, because really, to demonstrate this is a multi-sector effort, and that in our communities, we all have businesses, we all have nonprofits, we all have individuals that care about nature, and that's how you coalesce, right? And that's how you create that people power, by network weaving, by seeing what do you have. So like maybe the North Face doesn't have the HQ in New Mexico, but there's a store, they're connected, they want to invest, they know it's for the well-being of the community. And so coming together with the different resources that each of them has is really what makes this a successful start, and then over time, obviously, a long-term permanent investment. Since we're talking about this funding, Vivianette, I wanted to talk to you more about you're a grantee of the Outdoor Equity Fund, or your version of the Outdoor Equity grants in North Carolina. Are you able to easily like match funding, raise other funds locally? Like what does that look like for your organization in terms of funding demands and met or unmet demands?
So we participated in the Outdoor Equity Fund, which was made by Mountains. It was a private fund towards Western North Carolina. I live in Gaston County, and there are not many funds or resources for groups like mine. So we are constantly having to do outreach to other counties to see if we can get assistance. I would say that it's almost non-existent here for us to be able to get funding. With state funding, sometimes you have to be reimbursed for that. There are some small organizations that if we come to them, like right here, Southern Environmental, the law firm, or the Wilderness Society, if we come to them and we say, hey, we have this need, they're more than happy to assist us. But we really need like an ongoing permanent outdoor equity fund that we don't even know if like for next year we're going to have that fund or not. So this is something really important. And in order for us to be able to continue to do this work, we need funds. We created Latinos Aventureros with the idea of we just want to see ourselves represented outdoors. That was like the main idea. That's all. That's what we thought. It never crossed our mind that we would need funds. We were just like, we'll just go and take people outdoors. And our first year, we had 96 events, 13 volunteers. We did it all for free. And people hear that and they're like, wow, how'd you do that? We're just really passionate and we want to get things done. But when we have families that want to come camping with us and we don't have the gear because we don't have the funds, right? So when we think about outdoor equity funds, we have to think that getting people outdoors and making the outdoors diversified and inclusive costs money. It's not going to happen for free. And so that's why this is so important.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that generous perspective, and really just to bring light to the fact that, for example, North Carolina is in a very unique situation where this fund is private. And so the longevity of that fund still to be determined, right? And so that, again, continues to help make the case for a national fund that will continue to support states, that will continue to secure those long-term investments. I have one more question that I want to ask you, Vivianette, just to like kind of clean our palettes from all the barriers and the needs and all the things, because there's just so much power and beauty to the work and the programming that folks like yourself are doing on the ground. And then we'll open it up to Q&A, because I've seen a lot of wonderful questions come up in the chat. So can you share about a time that when you realized like this is impactful, like something you saw, something you were a part of in one of your programs that you were like, this is why we do this, even if we don't have funds?
Yes. That question is hard just because there's so much, right? And how to narrow it down. We have been doing this for a little over 2 years. So at this point, we've hosted over 250 events. And each one has its unique story of discovery and impact whether it's that we've been on a hike, we've gone paddling, or done like environmental conservation efforts, there's always a moment of awe from people like, I didn't even know that this trail existed in my backyard, or I've been trying to find the community, I've been trying to get outside of the house, and I just didn't know like where to go or who to start with. And being able to provide that joy just makes it worth it. So I can think about a time when we took a group snow tubing, and it was my first time going snow tubing. And a mom traveled with her 2 teens to join us, and they arrived. They didn't know anybody in the group. We introduced ourselves, and she told me, I've never ventured outside of my town. It took her about 2.5 hours to drive to where we were. And she said, I've never ventured outside of my town. And I just kept thinking to myself, if I stay here at home with the kids like all the time and I don't start taking them out, they're not going to discover like the Carolinas. In my words, they wouldn't discover how great the Carolinas is, right? And so we were able to offer them like that comfort zone and all the information they needed to be able to make it there. And that's not an isolated story. It's something that we hear all the time. A couple of weeks ago, I received a message on Facebook from someone that said, it was like, Vivianette, and I think this person had just joined like 2 or 3 months ago. And they said, Vivianette, I was at my lowest when I met the group, and spending time with the group outdoors and being able to bring my family has been a lifeline mentally and physically. And those are powerful words that remind us of the impact that we're having. And the last one, because I told you I can't keep it just to one. The last one that I'd like to share is we took a group of leaders camping with their families to Pisgah National Forest after an educational night hike. And we provided them the gear from a gear closet that we have. And in the morning, one of those teens came up to me, super sweet. And she's like, Miss Vivi, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing my family camping, because this was real camping. And I can't wait to go camping with my family again. And I was just blown away. First, because I thought that like her family actually did camping, but I guess it was just in their backyard. So it meant a lot to hear just a kiddo be so enthusiastic about being outdoors and that we could make that difference. So these stories matter, and they underscore the impact of communities coming together.
Oof, thank you so much. I got chills. Like just, and I see so much confirmation in the chat. Yes, like access to information is so important. Information that's made for us. We don't get that generic information sometimes on like a Forest Service website is not accessible for a lot of folks. So like just having a group that you feel safe, that you feel heard, that you feel understood, that you can understand, just makes the whole difference. And what a beautiful impact to see grow over the past 2 years of your work in North Carolina. Thank you so much for your service. That's beautiful. And it's I feel like it's so important to remind ourselves that the most sustainable solutions bring joy. And so really centering the joy, the end goal of this work is so important, because the work itself is hard, especially when there's no funds. We're talking about our own resources on the line. We're talking about our own time, energy that we might not even have. So like really honing in and grounding it on what's on the other side for the community, and the joy that it can bring and the benefits. It's really where the power is. So with that, I want to turn it over to the chat and some of the beautiful questions that have been asked. And I know some of the questions have also been answered in the chat, but I'll still bring them up here just in case folks are not following along there. So somebody asked if the efforts of these grants are strictly for programming and special events, or it can be used for infrastructure. I think we talked a little bit about that, but if anybody wants to just clarify on how that varies from community to community.
You know, the only point that I'd add there, and this, I think this goes back to like lessons learned through the Outdoor Equity Fund too, is that this grant is so beautiful because it is so bespoke, I think. And just to emphasize, like, at least in New Mexico, these funds can support like a disco in your backyard or like a multi-day backpacking trip in the Gila wilderness. So there's any number of definitions of outdoor recreation that qualify for the grant process. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And then, yeah, funding goes to programming in New Mexico and equipment and to pay adult teachers for their time, offset those costs of transportation, all those good things that these groups often just need a little bit of help with.
Beautiful. Thanks for providing that context. Somebody asked if the funding was discretionary funding from legislature or if it was tied to a new tax. And I think that's specific to New Mexico.
Yeah, and hopefully I did my best shot, Jerry, at answering that in the chat, but happy to talk more about what that looks like. And honestly, the answer in New Mexico is that it was piecemeal to begin with. It was general fund money, trying to figure out, again, some of those creative ways to get this in the line item for next year's budget, but it was year by year. There was no new tax, there was no new mechanism. And then many people in New Mexico have advocated and fought for the new Land of Enchantment Legacy Fund, which is a long-term, well-funded trust that is partially funding the Outdoor Equity Fund, and it's closer to that vision of permanent funding that I think people have had in mind for many years now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for providing that additional information. Somebody just dropped in the chat a toolkit by the National Caucus of Environmental Legislatures, which is a helpful overview of outdoor equity funding programs across the country. So that sounds like a fabulous resource for all folks here today to look at. And I highly recommend folks check it out. I don't see any other questions coming in the chat, but I do want to invite if anybody has anything else that they want to add. If you have personal experience with an equity fund or an opportunity fund that you would like to speak of, please you can use the raise hand feature and come off mute, and we would love to hear from you too. So we'll just give a minute for folks to think about whether y'all are interested in sharing a bit more here. Ooh.
Looks like Mr. Jerry has, yeah.
Yes, Jerry, please come off mute and share.
Roger. Glad to be in this space and with my brother Ángel Peña. We spent a few years working on a really awesome project together with the EPA. Yeah, I just wanted to share. So one of the projects I've worked on, so I work for the Sierra Club now. My previous role, I was the coalition lead for Together Outdoors, and I started an outdoor equity fund there. And it's going into its second year this year. And where that language came from to start it was I was trying to do this at the state level in Kentucky, where I live. And so I had a friend that unfortunately passed away. He drowned on a kayaking trip. And so I felt, this was years ago, so I was like, we need to get more funding for outdoor equity to train folks for programming, all kinds of stuff. The problem that I found was finding in the South, making sure making sure it could run, finding some making sure because I didn't want to. I know I could find a co-sponsor. But I didn't know if I couldn't figure out a path to get it to go through the House and go through the Senate, being that it's a predominantly Republican legislature. So what I've leaned to lately is looking at community foundation in Lexington, Kentucky, as the mechanism for doing that. So I just want to share that. It's I think that's something that I'm really, as someone that works in policy, I'm really concerned about in the South on legislature funded outdoor equity funds. How can we do it? And then I'm also curious to hear y'all the funding mechanism. Where's the funding mechanism at the state level, and then where's the funding mechanism at the federal level? You know, are we dipping into LWCF funds? Stuff like that. Yeah, just
That's a great question. Angel, do you want to take on that? I think we've talked a little bit about the state, but maybe national, what the funding might look like, because obviously it's going to depend on how it all gets written in, but how we're foreseeing it.
Yes, absolutely. Jerry, good to see you, carnal. I saw your name and I was like, yeah, there it is. And then I also just have a couple quick notes. Miss Axie, you talk about a disco in the backyard, like, don't even tempt me with a good time, you know? And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Outdoor Equity Fund, that it can support just the way community shows up in the outdoors. You don't always have to be climbing a 14-foot or 14,000 or I don't even know how they talk about it up in Colorado, but like you can also just cultivate and create community, right? Outdoors and literally in your backyard with the family. So that was that. And then as far as the mechanism, Mr. Jerry, solid question, sir. I can tell you this group of leaders from East Coast to West Coast who all identify as someone from a deliberately historically excluded community wanted to make sure that we were thinking of all the things. At the national level, we are looking at the National Park Foundation as a model, as a proof of concept. To take the best pieces of it and see how we can leverage that type of thinking. So at the federal level, we are looking at a private public fund because when you look at the National Park Foundation, there is a lot more private dollars than there are public dollars supporting the foundation. And working closely with Senator Heinrich's office, we are making sure that this already is just reallocated from a bucket of money that already exists. So we don't have to be either increasing taxes or asking for more resources to pump into this, rather get creative to give us a little bit to incentivize those private dollars to come in and support. And the National Outdoor Equity Grant Program would absolutely be supporting communities like you're describing out in the South, ones that come from a dynamic nuanced political landscape. And one of the other questions we've also taken on is that federally recognized tribes, for example, because there's barriers just there within that. The way we have thought about it is to ensure that these resources are able to support all kinds of communities, regardless or not if they are federally recognized. And so that's a little bit on the federal level of that.
Thank you so much, Angel. Yeah, I think you did a fantastic job just laying out how we're foreseeing it. And I think also to address kind of like the political nuance of it, we do believe that access to the outdoors, it's nonpartisan, right? Like I think we can all agree that there are benefits to be had on all sides of the aisle that there exist. And so really just continuing to be open to listening what that means for the different folks that could really benefit from something like this, disregarding on political affiliation. I want to pass it on to Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. Thank you so much for putting on a really, really great panel. I feel so honored to be here. Even jumping into this panel, I didn't realize that it was so focused in New Mexico, and I am joining from Albuquerque, so this is really great. I am a master's student in the Geography and Environmental Studies department here at University of New Mexico. I just defended my thesis about a week ago. It really explored disability and environmentalism, equity in wilderness spaces. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of ask you guys, maybe we could explore the nuance of equity, or I'm kind of curious about how disability presents in your organizations and what it means in this fund.
Hey, thank you for your question, Rebecca. Speaking from Latinos Aventureros, and I am also an advocate for Disability Rights North Carolina. A lot of what we do within our group is advocating for accessible trails and inviting families to come outdoors and making sure that when those families come outdoors with us, places are accessible, right? So that's a little bit about how we support and advocate for accessible spaces and how we invite people with disabilities to come outside and to feel and know that they belong.
And maybe I can just do a shout out to, I hope they don't mind me putting them on the spot, but two of the just like wonderful and miraculous Outdoor Equity Fund grant recipients in Albuquerque. And that's Mr. Martinez at the Albuquerque Sign Language Academy, who has received multiple Outdoor Equity Fund grants and is just a light and guiding force as the head of that school, to show what outdoor recreation and environmental education can and should look like. So the only way I know how to answer, Rebecca, that question is to maybe ground it in specifics and in the work that's happening. And then also Global Opportunities Unlimited, which is run by Dustin Berg. And not only is Dustin thinking about Outdoor Equity Fund, and again, forgive me for summarizing some of our conversations, he's also thinking about infrastructure, right? And making sure that trails are designed with adaptive recreation in mind from the get-go. And they're not retroactively built to accommodate all of us, but they're actually being thought about that from the very beginning. And so I would just highlight the work that they do. And if you want to know more about what it can look like when some of those programs are supported by, you know, kind of like the state is following their lead, those are two people and two programs who come to mind.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I am super familiar with Dustin's work, and he is just exceptional. But thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for that question. I also want to shout out two of the Outdoor Future Initiative members who are always bringing disability to the forefront of the work that we do. Vasu Sojitra and the Inclusive Outdoors program based, Inclusive Outdoors project based in Montana, and Kyle Stepp, who's a New Mexican para-triathlete, who they do fantastic work advocating for accessibility and expansive adaptability on all areas of outdoor recreation. Last one, I think we have for one more. Vanessa, would you like to share?
Sure, can you hear me? Awesome. So I'm Vanessa, I'm also from New Mexico. I'm also from our outdoor learning initiative that's housed in our public education department. And one thing I'd like to add that's brand new, like we just got off a spring budget conference a week ago. In New Mexico for schools, we met with our public insurance authority, because that's a really big barrier is when we're thinking of taking kids out, especially in relation to school, is the insurance coverage. And so we met with public insurance to ensure that all students, even if they don't have insurance, are covered on school trips, any school sponsored trips, including things like rock climbing and rafting and those kinds of things. And we have coverage now for up to $5 million per student on incidences. We hope, right? We hope that we mitigate those things, but we have that kind of coverage now. And so by like our office working with outdoor recreation and working with other offices, we're starting to get like a really good picture, K-12, and then working with higher ed as well on what do certification programs look like and how can we offer more trainings, especially for teachers. So like I offer twice a year for teachers free wilderness first aid training. And we think that's like our first step in getting educators comfortable with taking kids outdoors, not just like outfitters, because we want equitable access. We want to embed it in schools. So we have 16 schools we're working with right now doing that work, and it's really exciting. But I'd also like to say, if there's any of you in New Mexico that want to apply for, you know, outdoor equity funds or things like that, and you have a small staff, PED is also willing to like review some of your work before you hit submit on big grants, because we understand like we don't have recurring funds, but other places do. So we will help you if you're applying for like EPA funds or those other grants, we will look at them for you.
That is so generous and wonderful. Could you drop where do we do that? Is there a link? Is there a contact info? If you wouldn't mind sharing that in the chat, I feel like that's a fabulous resource. And we did see a bunch of folks here today from New Mexico. So hope y'all would connect with Vanessa and continue this conversation. I guess with that, anything else that our panelists want to like share? Final thoughts here as we wrap up?
No, I just want to say thank you so much, Vivianette, Miss Axie, and Miss Kawacha, for your leadership today. There's an amazing quote that I heard one time from a pretty amazing person who is really working to redefine this space around equity and outdoors. And I'm going to ruin the quote, but it really moved me, and I think about it all the time. Is if can we all imagine a world where everyone was able to grow up getting outdoors and grew up with the confidence and competence? What would that look like for our economy? What would that look like for our politics? What would that look like for our families? And it's just it hit me hard a couple of years ago, and think about it pretty often, especially when we're thinking about the Outdoor Equity Fund or the Outdoor Future Initiative. And Ms. Kawachi, I think I butchered your quote. Maybe you can help me on it, but I just wanted to share that with folks.
I appreciate that. That's a good quote. I think that it's an invitation. It's more than a quote. It's just an invitation to imagine a world where we all get to grow up having meaningful experiences and connections with nature. What would that world look like? What would it taste like? What would it smell like? What would it feel like to be part of that world? And I feel like that's a world we probably all want to be a part of, and we can all build together. So with that, I want to invite you all to save the date for our next event of this series. We're still finishing out the details, but put this on the calendar. More information will be coming at you soon, especially if you stay in touch with us. So if you want to take one action today, sign our letter of support. It's easy on our website. Put your name. Tell us why, or don't tell us why, but be here to support. We are trying to show at the national level how powerful, impactful, and needed this is. So we need you there. We're also inviting you to follow us on our Instagram at Outdoor Future. You can also like take all these links. I'm pretty sure my colleagues are dropping links in the chat for y'all right now, but you can also just scan them with your phones. And then lastly, as we continue to talk about funds and resources, and I will now butcher my friend Angel's quote, a vision without resources is nothing more than a hallucination. So we also need funds to continue to do this work equitably. Thank you all so much for joining us. Please come back next time. There will be music and dancing, and it will be the same amazingness, just a little bit more fun. We appreciate you all. Thank you, Axie. Thank you, Vivianette. Thank you, Angel. Everything you shared today was so impactful. I've learned things. I hope everybody is taking something away. Thank you, everyone who came. Tell your friends about next time, and we will see you here.